Spray Tips with Tom Wolf is brought to you by Loveland Products, makers of Li 700 penetrating non-ionic surfactant with Lesitech technology.
Hello, my name is Tom Wolf. I'm with Agrimetrics Research and Training, and today we're going to have a vlog about early morning spraying. I was at a meeting just a few days ago, and one of the questions I received, and this is the question of the week, is when there's dew on my plants in the morning, is it okay to spray? And that's a question I think we've all asked ourselves, and a few years ago we did some research just to test what happens when you spray a really wet plant. So I'll try to answer the question as best as I can with reference to that research result. We took plants, broadleaf and grassy plants, and we put them into a dew chamber and made them as wet as they could get with dew. They were wet to the point of runoff. We then took them out and sprayed them with a fine spray and a coarse spray, and we measured how much of the spray was actually retained by those plants. And we also were able to measure how much of it ran off those plants. And what we found was that the fine spray actually didn't dislodge any of the wetness on that leaf. So it kind of just settled in nicely, and everything stayed good. The coarse spray, though, came down with a significant force, and it did dislodge some of the spray. And we felt that at the time when we took those measurements, we dislodged from grassy weeds up to about 30% of the spray. But from broadleaf weeds, hardly any at all. And I think it really just has to do with the leaf architecture and the orientation of those leaves. Efficacy-wise, the dislodging of the spray had relatively little difference or little effect. So we still had nearly the full efficacy even when we dislodged some of the spray with a coarser spray quality. Probably a reason for that is that there's probably a slight benefit to spraying plants that are damp. The cuticle becomes a little bit hydrated. It opens up some hydrophilic pathways that some herbicides can enter more easily, and the overall waxiness of the leaf surface is I guess, not as powerful in that sense. So probably we're losing some and we're gaining some, and the net result is not much change. Personally, I'm always nervous about spraying in the early morning because of the leaf wetness, and I usually wait for a little bit of drying to occur before going out there. But I have not heard, and it would be interesting to hear from the listeners perhaps, to what degree losses of performance have been noticed from early morning spraying. I say don't worry too much about it, go for it. But that leads me to another topic, and this is a topic we want to explore in a little bit more detail this week, and that is the issue of early morning spraying. Is that a good idea in the first place? And you know, it's a very strong tradition in the farming community to get up before sunrise, get the sprayer ready, and then be ready to spray as soon as you have enough light to see. And that's because winds are calm in the early morning. And the real question is that okay, or is that a problem? The short answer is it's a bit of a problem, and the main reason it's a problem is because normally in the early morning of a summer day we have a temperature inversion. And what that really means is that the spray drift that hangs behind the spray boom tends not to go anywhere. It tends to just hang. It doesn't deposit because the fine mist is buoyant. It also doesn't disperse in the atmosphere, become diluted, because the atmosphere is what we call stable. What that air mass then does is one of two things, or both. And the first thing is it'll tend to run downhill. If there's any topography, cold air, and that's the air that's near the ground, tends to run downhill, and it can cause significant damage if there's a sensitive crop along that path. And the second thing that will happen is if it doesn't run downhill, it just stays hanging on the field, eventually in the morning when the sun rises and warms up, there will be some kind of a wind. It'll be a breeze, it might be in some unpredictable direction at the beginning, and you really have no control over where that spray cloud goes. So the initial direction could be towards a sensitive area again, even if it's uphill, and can cause significant damage there. So that's the main problem. I don't want to say that there's an inversion every morning. Inversions typically occur on clear nights. They typically occur when there's no other synoptic condition, in other words, a low pressure system moving in or a high pressure system moving in, and that causes some associated wind. Winds and clouds tend to suppress inversion. So if you have a cloudy morning, probably you won't be inverted. If you have a bit of a breeze because there's some weather system on the way, you probably won't have an inversion because the atmosphere is mixing from that wind. So I don't want to shut the door on early morning spraying, but in the absence of those two conditions, here's what typically happens. And I'll try to explain this to you with some figures I'll draw. So this is just a graph that shows height here and temperature here. And the typical condition on Earth is that we have a decrease in temperature with height. So at the soil, we typically have warm air, and it decreases in temperature with height, and that's because there's less pressure on that air mass. Okay, so the pressure just causes the air to expand, and it cools as a result of that. Now, when the sun shines, we have typically sun heating the earth near the soil and heating the air. And as a result, the air temperature profile when the sun is out is just a little bit more pronounced. So you have a greater rate of decrease of temperature with height. What this means is that if there's an air parcel right here, and it basically would be warmer than is predicted by the model, and that air would rise, okay, because it's warmer than the air around it would be. And it would rise and cool off, but it would still be warmer than the air around it. And as a result of that, it would continue to rise. And conversely, other air parcels also drop. You get a lot of thermal mixing. That's what really disperses a lot of our atmospheric pollutants in the world. And the atmosphere is a very effective sink, I guess, or diluter of some of these problems. Now it's nighttime. The sun is gone, and there's no more solar heating of the soil. And now what happens is the temperature profile is essentially reversed from this predicted model. The air now cools near the soil, and it cools to a lesser and lesser degree the higher we go. And as a result of that, you have this so-called inversion. In other words, the normal temperature profile that we predict from pressure is inverted. It gets cooler with elevation, here it gets warmer with elevation. As a result of that, now if we have a parcel of air that is here and it is dislodged and rises, it would obviously cool, but because it started off quite a bit colder than the air around it, even when it cools, it's still going to be colder than the air in its new location, and it will, as a result of that, turn right around and come right back down to where it came from. You can't actually dislodge an air parcel in a stable atmosphere. So an inversion is stable. As a result of that, if you have a drift cloud that were to be emitted from a sprayer, it would essentially, if you have your spray boom here, and your drift cloud would essentially just hang in that layer that it's emitted from. It would not rise, it would not fall. These are just the buoyant small droplets, and it would move potentially slowly somewhere else where you don't want it. That's the problem. If you had a sunny condition, something entirely different would happen. This spray cloud would very quickly be forced into the ground and up into the atmosphere, and it would become very dilute with distance. As a result of that, if it's sunny out and a little bit windy, you get very little damage with distance. Most of the damage from drift would occur very, very close to the site of initial contact, and then it would be virtually unnoticeable, even just 10 or 20 meters away. So the wind and the breeze and the sun is actually the friend of a spray operator in that sense. You do pay a bit of a price by having more of the chemical in the atmosphere, and you're not really accounting for it, and that is a source of potential future problems. For example, the spray cloud may not break down very quickly in the air, and as a result it could travel long distances and come back down in precipitation, for example. So those are concerns, but in terms of acute damage downwind, the morning spraying can create some of those problems. There's been a bit of interest with these new lights that are available now for spray booms. I think those are a great idea. They give you the opportunity to see your spray pattern, maybe under lower light conditions, or even in the day. It might enhance the visibility of that spray pattern. And the question then becomes, should I spray tonight, or is it not a good idea to spray in the morning or whatever, because I could with those lights. And so we need to, I think, address this issue head on and say, you know what, this morning we know from the weather conditions that we have an inversion and therefore we shouldn't spray, or this morning we know that we don't have an inversion and therefore we can spray. So those lights have really forced us to think about this question and hopefully make available better information to producers. I would love to see weather forecasting, for example, that includes atmospheric stability as part of its forecasting scheme, so that the producer would know, atmosphere is stable today, therefore probably not a good time to spray. Atmosphere is turbulent today, excellent time to spray. And that's a future challenge, I think, for the Weather Forecasting Service. So I guess the answer to the question is, if it's early morning and you need to get some acres done, be mindful of the wetness, but don't let it discourage you too much. Be more mindful of the atmospheric condition. Maybe allow for an hour or two after sunrise for some of that inversion to burn off, and then go ahead and do your spraying. And that's the vlog for this week.